Good evening, everyone. I'm Carla Canonico, publisher of QUILTsocial magazine and QUILTsocial daily blog. Thank you for joining us today as we reveal the quilting done on the 3 versions of the Spectrum quilt. The 12 blocks that were used to make the Spectrum quilt have been designed by award-winning quilter Claire Haillot. On QUILTsocial, for the last 9 months, expert quilters Claire Haillot of Quilting with Claire, Elaine Theriault of Crazy Quilter on a Bike, and Paul Léger of Paul Léger Quilts have been sharing the step-by-step instructions on how to make their version of the Spectrum quilt blocks. This has resulted in a trio of unique quilts that will be treasured forever. What has most fascinated me about this quilt along is in all the time that they're piecing their quilts, it amazed me how incredibly different the same block would look depending on the collection that was used, so that they almost looked like they were not at all the same block. So that was very exciting for me. And the other thing that I really liked about it is that it offers our viewers 3 different ways of actually laying out the quilt blocks and what else can you make with Claire's sparkling quilt blocks. So the fabric contributors for our quilt along are the anthology fabrics, Little Girl in the Blue Armchair, Riley Blake Designs Blue Stitch, and the Bernard Tex Wave Texture. I'd like to also take advantage and thank our QUILTsocial sponsor, HA Kidd and Company Limited, for providing the Fairfield batting and the Gutermann threads for piecing and quilting. And the giveaway, I know everybody's very excited about that. The giveaway, I hope you had a chance to enter. If you haven't, don't worry about it. You still have till midnight tonight to enter. We will be placing the link in the comments tonight at the end of the event. And what else? We will draw the winners tomorrow, the 3 winners tomorrow. And if you want to ask questions or comment, you can definitely put that in the comments section, and we will try to get to them as many as we can. We are looking at a good time, and with the 3 contributors, you know, sharing their experience of the quilt along, and also without any further delay, we're going to start with Claire.
Thank you, Carla. So hello, everyone, and we're very excited to be here tonight to be finally showcasing our wonderful quilts, all the 3 of us together. I think you're in for a nice treat. And so I'm going to start the ball by just talking briefly about my design that you see here. So the quilt was actually something I designed probably, I think it was like probably 2008. So I guess I do have, having made that quilt already in the same format as Elaine has on her quilt. I had a few years to look at those blocks and say, oh, I wish I would have worked it a little bit differently, used a different value to make that quilt. So last year, when we were all starting this the pandemic that we're still a little bit in, but we're finally seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, I got a phone call from Carla asking me, would you be willing to start to present one of your designs as a quilt along for this year with QUILTsocial? So I jumped. I really wanted to redo that quilt because I really wanted to feature the blocks in a different setting that I had done previously. So I'm going to show you what I started to do, because it was perfect timing as well, as I was moving into a new location, a new house, and I really wanted to be able to redesign my whole bedroom and be able to show off something completely new. I wanted it to be my place for my refuge, my area where my sanctuary, where I can meditate and be on my own and have no kids. So that was my new area, and I wanted it to be a very calming and soothing. So I needed to make a calming and soothing quilt. And so I fell in love with the batik collection, Little Girl in a Blue Armchair from Anthology Fabrics. And they were very nice enough to be going along with us and sharing their wonderful fabrics with us. And so at first I thought, okay, I don't want to redo, I didn't want to make a big king size quilt. And I thought at first I was going to make a lap quilt. But when I looked at my bedroom, I said, no, I'm going to make a bed runner. And so that's how the design changed to the bed runner that you see on the top. And of course, with all of this pandemic, I still managed to be able to see Paul, and we had a chance to take a few pictures, being completely safe. I really didn't want to be the one to give the, COVID to Paul. So you can see I was very, very well protected so that Paul could stay safe. So that's how it started. And I just, and now you see all of the 12 blocks. My design was pretty much set. I made all of the blocks during last summer. And in fall, it was time for me to start placing them and positioning them. And I, again, even though I had set myself on a design, I realized that as I was making the blocks, I still, again, played with the values. And so I changed the blocks all over again where they were going to be positioned to what you see now. So my design wall was actually my bed for that point to make it, but it's still, I really liked making all of the blocks. It was fun, even though I had made them once, to make them again. It was a lot of fun. And I used Gutermann threads for the piecing, and I received actually this package, which was really cool. So I wanted to point it out because if ever someone, is trying to figure out what to gift to a quilter, this is the perfect combo set to start. So it has all of your basic blenders for piecing, and those, those clips that we love so much. So I had to show it today because it's very convenient. So for me, I actually used mostly the beige for it's actually off-white for when I was piecing the lighter fabrics, and then I moved to the gray when I had darker fabrics. That's how I pieced my blocks together with Gutermann. And then once all of that was done, which was last fall, I believe, I finished piecing it together. I went with a 1-inch sashing, a very limited, because of course, I could have just sewn the blocks side by side, but I really wanted to give them a little bit more room and more flow. And actually, that's the fun part about making any kind of quilt design, is that with having that 1-inch sashing, you could actually see how like if you see here, there's this square plays off to the next triangle in the next block. So it was actually fun to see now, even though I've already made this quilt design 2 times, I'm like, I can make it a 3rd time because I could play with that design and offset it with that block. So it's a never-ending story with me with designing quilts. That's why I like it so much. And so as Carla mentioned, I did, it's actually Elaine that quilted on her long arm with the Fairfield natural cotton quilt batting. So maybe she can talk more about that when it gets to her, but you can see her magnificent work with her long arm machine. We went with, I believe it's the serpentine design, but I call it the waves because it's such a really Cape Codish look, those colors. And like I said, I wanted my bedroom to be a sanctuary. So having that kind of wave would remind me of the calm and serenity of the sound of the wave. So, instead of hearing my kids screaming and yelling, I block that out and just listen to the waves. That's my story. All right, so that's the beginning of my, just gonna start here. So that's how it all started with, that's the first behind the scenes to see how that bed runner was made. But the big secret, what was never said, and what I'm actually going to reveal for the first time, is that I was so excited to make the blogs to begin with that I actually made the first, I think it's 7 blocks. No, the first 5 blocks, I actually made them, sewed them up without taking any pictures for the blog postings. And so when I finally realized that I did a oops, so all the following blocks, I was making them and taking pictures as I go along, but I actually had to remake the first 7 blocks. And so if you don't believe me, I'm going to now share with you again some pictures so that you can see that the first 7 blocks were actually done in 12-inch design for the bed runner, but afterwards they were actually remade to a 6-inch finished look. So at that point I was like, I'm making them smaller because I don't want to run out of any fabrics, and it's the pictures, it's still going to look good, but I wasn't thinking any further than just redoing the blocks for photography. And once those 7 blocks were finished, I kind of said, well, okay, maybe I can do something with it. And that's when my idea came to make a pillow. And so, and it's a perfect size because you kind of, maybe you would have noticed that looking at my bed, there was missing a center point on at the head of the bed. And so this was just perfect when I was playing around with my 12-inch blocks, and then I started throwing the 6-inch blocks on the bed. I said, well, actually, you know, I could make just a pillow, and here it is. So it's a different setting because I had 7. I'm not crazy enough to go and make 12 blocks 6-inch. I just made the 7 that were missing. And then I actually went with the quilting, and when it's a small piece, I have no problem quilting with my FAF creative icon. So the centerpiece, I actually used an embroidery that was on the machine, and I used the Guttman 30 weight, and really loved it. It's a variegated thread because the embroideries double stitches. It really makes a nice design that pops out. And again, I had no problem having a thick embroidery on my pillow because it is meant to be a piece for showcasing. It's not for use, so it was just perfect for what I wanted. And so the corners were also quilted using that variegated thread, but all of the other blocks were used. I actually used the Guttman Chow Blue, just a solid color, very light, so that it didn't become too aggressive, the quilting. So, and I used the butterflies because I love the meaning of the butterflies. I've used it a few times in other of my projects, and it was just perfect for my sanctuary, waves and butterflies.
Yep.
And now it sits beautifully on my bed. And I forgot, I wanted to say something and I forgot it, but here it is. You can see the whole design now, the look of the bedroom with, and so now I'm ready. It's been a year. I've moved in a year ago, and I finally have my bedroom decor finished with that piece.
It's definitely beautiful, Claire. Great job. I love the quilting on the pillow because it's just so rich, and it is done with variegated and solid colors of thread. I just find that the play with the variegation of the thread really gives that variety for the eye to, like, sort of like a butterfly. You just go a bit all over the place, but it's really, really nice. I really like that. Those were published in the month of May, how to make the pillow and all that. So if you're interested, you could definitely check that out on QUILTsocial. And so it's really nice. And we had a few reveals about secrets, about making the blocks a bit earlier, smaller, larger. Anyways, is that all you wanted to add, Claire, for now?
I think it's well, one thing I can actually say that is that, as I mentioned, but I'm sure it'll come up later also, is that because I had to redo the 7 first blocks that were supposed to be the initial blocks, the 8th block actually turned out to be the first block that was posted on
Yes.
on QUILTsocial. So if you can follow along, the 8th block was now the first block, the 9th block was as the second block. So whoever has started making those, the QUILTsocial quilt along, if they start thinking, oh, the first block was really difficult, it's normal. The first 5 blocks were supposed to be the last block. So they were the ones with a little bit more difficulty, level of difficulty. It was just the skill set was a little bit more intense. So if you're planning on starting and you're a beginner and you're not sure, don't start with the first 5.
Okay.
And I apologize in advance, but now you know why the first 5 blocks were actually some of the most difficult out of the whole, because you were supposed to have gained all of this experience from the other blocks before getting to them. Yeah.
Okay. Good to note. Oh my goodness, this is good. Well, we are going to move on to Elaine. Elaine, do you want to talk to us about your awesome quilt as well?
Great.
Any
Well,
secrets to reveal tonight?
well, so anyway, Carla, I just wanted to thank you for the experience when you called and said, would you like to participate in a quilt along? I mean, how can you say no? You can't say no to Carla, and I can never say no to a quilt along. And so after some discussions with Claire and, saw what we were going to make, and I thought, wow, that's really great. And I think one of the hardest things was trying to find a fabric that was really going to do the blocks justice. And so thankfully, we found the Blue Stitch collection, which is designed by Christopher Thompson from Raleigh Blake Designs. And, unfortunately, because of I have fluorescent lighting in my studio, and it has literally washed the blue color out of the quilt here behind me. But honestly, it is such a gorgeous blue. It's so rich and saturated. I loved working with the whole thing. But one of the things when I started to work with mine is I was really excited about the little motifs on the selvages. And so if anybody followed along, I cut the selvages off before I actually started to cut the blocks. I'm going to show you what I did with those later. But I know that Claire's little switcheroo there kind of caught me up a little bit as well, because there was at one point, and I'm all ready to post the blocks and stuff, and it was like, oops, wrong block, because I was following her original pattern. So anyway, that was a little bit of a challenge to have to deal with. But what I did that was probably different from Paul and Claire was, instead of, Claire had, I forget, I think there were 12 fabrics in total that you started with for the blocks. And it was, fabric A, fabric B, and so on for each of the blocks. And because the values in mine was a little bit different than what Claire had originally done, I knew that wasn't going to work for me. And so that when I would look at a particular block, I may not have actually got the right part to pop out that I wanted to. So every one of my blocks, I kind of started over from scratch. I just took my, collection of fabrics and said, okay, so what should be the background? Because I think there's 4 different whites that I work with for backgrounds. And then, okay, well, what will my dark be? What will my light be? What will my medium be? And so every block I reconfigured that. And so that was kind of exciting and a little bit of a lesson in, what do you do when what the pattern designer has indicated for light, medium, and dark isn't really what is going to work for your fabrics. So that was kind of a good exercise, and it meant that every time I did the blocks, I had to go through that exercise. So that was interesting. And then, as Claire said, she has 12 blocks that she designed. You see in her bed runner, she has 12, but if you see the whole picture of my quilt, there are 13 blocks because it's set on point. So I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know which one of the blocks I want to remake. And I didn't want to make it so that it looked like the original one. And, and Claire kind of shines us tonight because she comes up with a slide presentation. I'm like, okay, I'm not prepared with that. So you'll just have to trust me that I picked, I laid the blocks all around the design wall and I said, okay, which one do I like the most? And, how do they sort of symmetrically fit with the colors and stuff that I have chosen? And so then I was able to pick the block, and I think it was block number 11 by the new scheme. And so I remade that, and that block went into the center, and then the rest of the blocks were sort of, put symmetrically around it based on value and a little bit on the style. So that was kind of fun. And then, so if anybody is following my instructions on the internet, I didn't necessarily go into a lot of detail for every block because, once you've made a half square triangle, you've made a half square triangle and whatnot. I didn't worry so much about it. But for anyone who's ever taken a class with me, my big thing is how to reduce the bulk in a block. I have no idea where that started years ago, and that is the big thing for me. And, as you can see with these blocks, there's a lot of points, there's a lot of half square triangles, a lot of flying geese. So there was a lot of bulk in some of the blocks. So I came up with my own little pressing plans, seams were twirled on the back, all kinds of fun stuff. And so I was able to pretty much come up with a decent pressing plan for every one of the blocks. And so that's really what my focus is when I do this kind of stuff. So that was really exciting. And then Claire's original instructions for this quilt was a sashing of, I believe it was 4 inches. Yeah. And so I was like, that's just going to make a giant quilt. And I'm in the mindset these days that I don't mind to make a big quilt, but I didn't want to make a giant quilt. So I actually I didn't recreate the blocks in EQ8, but I did take just the setting into EQ8 and played around with the sizes and decided that by putting in a 2-inch or cut 2.5, but a 2-inch sashing in there was actually going to work out and be the better solution. So it ended up being, gosh, I'm not even sure how big it is, but it's about, I can't remember. Anyway, I think it's about 80 inches square. So it's a nice size for a topper on a bed, or if you use a smaller bed, it would be good as a quilt, but it's not a gigantic quilt. And then, it came the process, and I build on, I build on the design wall. So I put all of my blocks onto the design wall. I was looking at the sashing. Okay, this is great. I looked at the setting triangles, because when you order fabric, online, and you don't really have it in mind, you might kind of, I'm not sure. And we didn't have a chance to go back and get more. So if you made the wrong choice, you kind of stuck with what you had. So my setting triangles are dark, which is not normal. A lot of times they tend to be light. And when I put them on the wall, and I was like, ooh, I'm not sure I'm going to be like this. And I thought, well, you know what? You don't have any other choice. So sew them together. So I did. And then I ended up, putting the sashing on. I'd already cut the inner border. I'd already cut the inner border of another fabric and said, no, that's not going to work, had enough. So anyway, it ended up being a gorgeous quilt that I absolutely love. And like I said, I wish I could share with you the real color of it because it just is a little bit washed out. When it came time to quilt it, I had already quilted Claire's at that point. And I should tell you about the thread too. So I did piece it with the Gutermann. I used white predominantly for the whole quilt. There's a lot of white in it. So, and again, the thread works really well. So it's nice to, to work with a good thread for that. So then it came time to do the quilting. And I kind of struggled a little bit because I thought, well, what should I do? Should I do a custom quilt job on this quilt? Or should I just do an edge to edge, pantograph? And then I looked at all the fabrics and I looked at all the blocks and whatnot. And I thought, holy smokes, if this is going to be a custom job with those 13 blocks and all those setting triangles, this is going to be huge. And for me personally, whenever I get a custom quilt on the long arm, it takes me weeks to get it finished. And I thought, you know what? You don't have weeks to finish this. You need to get it done. Then I evaluated, the busyness of the blocks. I evaluated the fabric that was there and thought, you know what I really need to do is an edge to edge design on it. So I did actually get a picture of the edge to edge pattern on it, which I'll show you in a second. And And so, you know, and then put the binding on and whatnot. And it, you know, I love it. It's really, really pretty. So when I was making my quilt, I did not have to remake 7 extra blocks and wonder what to do with them at the end. I only had a few extra half square triangles. So as I was going through the process, and it was like, okay, well, you know what, I cut this half square triangle, the value, that's not quite right. So I had to substitute a few of them. So when I was finished, it was like, what am I going to do with those half square triangles? Because I like to use things up. So I laid them out on the table, started to mess around with them. Again, I'm a very visual designer. And once they were done, I thought, you know what, I can make a pillow out of it. And then what happened, because this is my 6th sense in the quilting world, I was like, it needs to have a little border around the pillow. So I'll grab some fabric and put a border around it. And I didn't realize when I did that, that I chose the same fabric that I put in the sashing in the quilt. It just happened in the back of my mind, and the quilt had already been done a long time ago. So here is the cushion. So it's, I believe it's 16 inches finished. So it's got a little 16-inch pillow form in there. But it's great because, you know, I just happen to have the, you know, enough triangles off to do the half square triangles here to make the little pinwheels. And then I had most of the ones that I used in the little elements on the side. I had to make just a couple more in order to have it, but there's nothing left. All the half square triangles got used up. So that was perfect. And what I find when I'm making a pillow is that by putting, you know, a little border around the top here, what happens is you can still see all the pattern on the front and not have to worry about it. And what I find when I'm making a pillow is that by putting, okay, oh, I can hear some background noise. Anyway, all right, so then I had the selvages. What am I going to do with those selvages that I had so diligently cut off of all of the fabrics that I received? And so I ended up making a couple of little zippered pouches. So you can see there, I used a foundation, and the instructions are on the QUILTsocial webpage for the cushion and for the little zippered pouches. But I had saved enough of the fabrics so that I would be able to see the fabric, and then used only the really interesting, and I don't know if you can see that up close there, but that was the really neat little color part, if you want, for each that was on the selvages of each one of them. So it was really fun to do, and I had enough selvages that I could actually make 2 zippered pouches. So that was really cool and kind of a little bonus project. So the instructions for that are online. And then just really quickly, I'm going to share with you the quilting of that. So this is what the quilting, this is the pattern that I chose for the quilt. And like I said, it is an all over or edge to edge pantograph, if you want to say. And it's just, it's kind of like a flower. So it really fit in with the blue stitch because it really, it has flowers all over it. So it was perfect to do that. Okay, and then, oh, I guess I should have went up to the, I'm sitting here. Okay, so then the other thing that I did with the leftover salvages was this quilt needed, oh, just a little, there we go. Okay, so this quilt needed a label. So I, Claire had originally called it Leviados, so I kept that name. And I used my Husqvarna Viking, the Designer Sapphire 85, and the Premier Plus 2 software, or actually, no, I used the new one, the MySonnet embroidery software, and I created this embroidery label. So it's really neat. I was never really a fan of embroidered quilt labels, but this lettering is so small, it's 6 millimeters high, you can actually get a lot of stuff on the label. And then I used some more of the selvages to create a border on it. And so it's now hand stitched to the back of the quilt. So it was just a really neat way of using pretty much everything that I had, all the fabric, the leftovers, and the salvages, and got some really neat projects out of it. So
That's really pretty.
yeah,
Very,
so it
very
was a lot
pretty.
of fun. And thank you again, Carla, for letting me participate in this.
You're very welcome. The pleasure's all mine for everybody participating together in this very, very, very exciting quilt along. Before we go to Paul, I just wanted to make sure that everybody knows that the instructions to all the blocks, all the 12 blocks and the 3 versions of the blocks are online. They're on QUILTsocial. There is a little banner on the right-hand side of the homepage that you can click, and each block there will take you to the post with the instructions. So we're still there. We're going to leave it there, and for people to enjoy. And so, Paul, what do you think? Are you ready?
I'm as
Thank
ready
you.
as I'll ever be, Carla. You know me. Like Claire and Elaine, I want to start off also by thanking you, Carla, for inviting me on to participate on this quilt along, this quest. It was fun, I must say. Although as I'm writing the blogs and doing the blocks, it was maybe not as fun, but as I was progressing in the
Yes.
whole process. It was fun because I was starting to see it more. My quilt, as you can see behind me, came about because when I was invited to participate and I saw the original layout, there was things that I enjoyed about it and things that I did not enjoy about it. In my case, I enjoyed the fact that it was going to bring me back to making traditional blocks. And it's something I don't do enough of. So this for me was bringing me back to my earlier days in quilting. But my recent days in quilting now is I love modern. I love modern quilting. So I was like, how can I take these traditional blocks and give it a modern look? So to do so is exactly as you see, I did the 12 blocks. I have 2 rows of 6 with a lot of negative space on each side. The equivalent of 1 row on this side and the equivalent of 2 rows on this side of the blocks, with just enough lattice, if you want to call it, between the blocks to make it float on the background instead of. When it came though to design and this quilt, naturally one of the biggest element is what fabrics am I going to use? I love blenders. I love blenders. I always have. I'm not much of a fabric with a pattern on it. They're nice. There's some beautiful ones, but I prefer the almost solid, the texture type fabrics.
Mhm.
So for me, I decided to choose Wave Textures by Ben Artex for my project. I did use EQ8 a bit in my planning, only for the playing of the colors. I took all the colors that I chose and I started placing them in the blocks at the beginning of this whole project, which was good for me to know because I need, like, how much fabric do I need? The one thing I discovered as the project was coming along was I needed to do some switches in my fabric choices. I might have decided to put, here for example, where am I? I think I picked a lighter red and it was just going to get lost. And also I decided to replace it by an orange. I gave myself permission to make these changes as the quilt was going on because it would have been semi-washed out if I had not. It would have just been a couple of colors, and I wanted a bit more distinction in some of these colors. And in some other places, I wanted just that play with the colors more so than having contrast. What else can I say? Compared to my 2 colleagues, Claire and Elaine, I didn't go around making little zippered pouches and little pillows and so on and so forth, nor did I do any presentation, a slide presentation. I just did basically what I was asked to do. But I had fun. For the quilting, on my case, my quilting was done by Kim Mullins of Eye Candy Quilting here in Ottawa. And me and Kim, we have this great little rapport. I show up, I don't know what I want, but I know what I want. She doesn't know what I want, but she figures out what I need. So it's going back and forth. And I think what helps is I give Kim warning. I will send her sketches and so on and so forth of what's coming. So she has also time to think about it. What she did in the center for the block style, she basically echoed quilted in this ditch, all these blocks. But what she did, that I'll switch cameras in a second, is she took this block here and mimicked it over here and block 2 beside it, and then she repeated it again here. Let me see if I can't switch cameras to give you a better. It's not quite clear. Lighting is a bit difficult here, but you can see the outlines of the blocks in which she did. So basically, every block that I did once, she quilted them 2 to 3 times each, and she did it in my case, an expert way, as she normally does. Thank you, Kim, if you're listening.
I think that that's a very cool concept, because I find that your quilt has a bit of a modern feel to it, although it's using traditional blocks because of all the negative space, and then you've got this one strip with all the sparkle, right? So but I find it very, very brilliant that she would repeat the traditional blocks within the negative space. So that part I really liked about it. I thought it was quite ingenious. So kudos to Kim for thinking about that one as well. And I find that your point about switching colors, I think it's very important when you're choosing your colors for any quilt block. It's like it is how you're going to play with those colors that is going to, like ultimately decide which colors you're going to use. And like doing it just the one time like that is not right. You need to make sure that all your colors balance and that they pop and things like that. So yeah, it really, like, quilting is not just about piecing pieces of fabric together. It is about knowing a lot about color value and what looks great, together and things like that. It has to be harmonious, right? And so, yeah, like, I think it's really terrific. Have you got anything else to say? Does anybody else have, Paul?
The only thing I think I'd like to add is I know my approach compared to Claire's and compared to Elaine's to make these blocks was totally different. I did, as I mentioned earlier, I did put it all in EQ8, and then I printed the blocks. I did not print the directions of how to make these blocks. So my intention to create this quilt was, how many different ways can I make a half square triangle? Compared to Elaine, where I've showed you once.
Let's see.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, amazingly, I came to several ways, making a big sheet of fabric, smaller pieces, only a couple ones. I did come up with many ways. And I think for any one of us here on the panel or out there listening, is try new things. Do go out, try new things, because in some cases I did one place, the whole block is half square triangles. It was, I think, a 16 by 16. Thank you, Claire. And I did it totally in half square triangles. I could have done flying geese, but I said, no, I want to see how this is going to turn out. How is this going to work? And for me, it worked.
Yeah.
And some other times, no, I know it needed the flying geese. So I said, yes, buying patterns, go for it. Follow the blog, go for it. But find something that you like, but don't be afraid to try something else. Push yourself to go try. I need to learn a new technique. You might like it, you might not, but at least you've tried it.
Yeah. And it's only fabric, so it can always be ripped out, right?
Exactly.
Cut again. It's not the end of the world. And yeah, but it is always like a learning curve. Like, you can never say, well, I'm done, I've learned everything. No, not really. You can always make something you made 10 years ago better, 5 years ago, 1 year ago, whatever, and there's always room for improvements if you always are striving for the best quilt that you've ever made, only followed by the best quilt that you'll ever make, and so on and so forth. So
can I say something?
Yep, sorry, Elaine, go ahead.
So I want to congratulate Paul, because you know what, that's exactly what I tell my students a lot of times, is that there are sometimes a block is made in a way that it just doesn't work. And so by looking at it and breaking it down into components and saying, instead of doing, you know, a square and a square or 2 flying geese, I can make 4 half square triangles. And that gives them ownership to take any pattern and do whatever they want with it. So I think that that was a really excellent way of doing your posts, because we wanted to try to put a different spin on it for everyone. So I think that was a really a very clever thing that you did to do that. And I also wanted to say that I love blenders, but I don't know that I could successfully make an entire quilt out of the same blender collection like you did. And I think you chose your colors well, and the resulting quilt is phenomenal. I love it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I agree. Well, all 3 of them to me are phenomenal. So, you know, but yeah, to have just the solids and run with that, it's fantastic. It's really great. Any questions that that you've been receiving at all? Are you able to see it?
I haven't seen any.
I have seen comments, but
Yeah,
apparently
I think it's Diane that says, Jean saying, what is blenders? So I think we can, Paul, do you want to explain what are blenders?
Blenders are how do I explain blenders? Blenders, okay, they're solids, but there's texture to the fabric. And naturally, I do have, it's like this is a blender. It's not solid, and there's a bit of texture, there's a bit of movement happening to your fabric. It's not totally solid. So it gives it.
It's monochromatic. It's monochromatic in that it reads as, let's say, red, but it's not one red.
Yeah, exactly. And in this case here, it does mimic, if you were to see the fabric close up, it's waves textures, and for me, it is a wavy type fabric. So it gives it a bit of tone on tone, movement. It's not plain, which I love my plains. So it just adds. Jane, you asked about questions, and although I had noticed when this came up, but somebody had popped up a private message, and it says, "Are we playing cribbage tomorrow night?" And yes, we are, because I know the ladies are watching right now. We are playing cribbage tomorrow night.
That's too funny.
Yeah, good question.
But you know, but the other thing, going back to the blenders, is that by having the blenders, and you've used those traditional blocks, as you said, you really have a modern take on a traditional quilt. So if you want a little bit of both, the best of both worlds, then you know what, you definitely can make that happen. So
yeah.
There's another question here from Leslie. Says, Paul, what colors are they? It looks like rust on the monitor, but is it red? It goes from rust to red. One's actually almost a dark candy apple red. There's one that's called, oh, good Lord. You're asking now, I forget the name. I don't know. But I have about 3 to 4 reds, and it really starts from yellow going to a dark red.
Yeah.
I don't know if I can do this or I should do this, but see, it's turning orange, but it's actually a much darker red than it appears. And actually, if you look, you can actually see the texture of the fabric. So have laptop will move.
Yeah. Yeah, it's sort of an orangey red.
Yeah. Yes.
But there's like a burgundy. I mean, all the fabrics are actually all outlined in every post. So whatever block he's making, or Elaine or Claire, all the fabrics are listed in the instructions. So if you want to go and check it out to get the name of it, then it's all there, is what I'm trying to say. Any other questions you're getting? Because when I turn mine on, I get feedback. So
Carol is asking, what fabric line did each one of us use?
Yes.
So who wants to start off that?
Oh, you go, Claire.
Okay, so
Okay.
I've used Little Girl in a Blue Armchair by Anthology Fabrics. So it's actually a batik collection. And I really loved working with it. I love the quality of the batik. And also because something most people don't know is that I'm dyslexic. So I really, really love having fabric that you can use both sides and it's not a
Good.
mistake. So it just makes things nicer for me. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, and so I use the Blue Stitch. So there you can see Blue Stitch collection by Christopher Thompson. And it was designed by, there we go, by Raleigh Blake Design. So it was, you know, there's a lot of, it was an interesting collection because well, first off, there was a right and a wrong side to it, so I had to deal with that. But one of the fabrics had words on it. So it was one of the dark blue ones had white words on it, which I love words. And then a lot of them were florals, but then there were also some little prints. So here there were just prints with, you know, dark blue with little white dots on it. And there again, you can see the words and then some of the flowers and things like that. So it was very pretty, lots of different motifs to work with and whatnot. But really when I chose the fabrics, I was more going for the value as opposed to what was on each one of them. But Blue Stitch collection by Raleigh Blake Designs.
And my collection was from Ben Artex, and it was called Wave Textures. I believe there's over 40 different possible colors in their collection.
Mhm.
It's
It's a big collection.
They all work well together. Mind you, collections do. I find blenders, they're all made to work together. But in this case, there was really, if you were to put them all color to color, it would really make a nice flow of colors going from left to right or right to left, which I enjoy.
Any other questions that you're receiving
Yeah.
on your end?
I'm organized now. I can see everything. So go ahead. Give us all the questions. I can see them.
Okay.
So
Claire's
Nancy
gonna do it.
asked, what weight batting did you use with the variegated threads? So if it's for my pillow, it's the same as for the bed runner I have behind me. It was a medium loft that I've used it's still a cotton batting, but it was a medium loft for that specific design. I went with that. All right, I'm not seeing any, hold on. Now that I say I can see the questions,
Yeah,
seeing them anymore.
you know, you're it.
Yeah, because I can't see the questions.
Yeah, it was same here.
One person asked, Diane, she says, did you get your fabrics at your local quilt shops? I think that we're all very into going to see our local quilt shops, but the fact of the matter for this particular project, we actually worked with the manufacturer of the fabric so that we can have them 6 months before their launch. And that's kind of like behind the scenes of all of the joys of working with blogs and quilt designs, is that if we wait for a fabric to be in the shops before preparing it, writing the story and putting it onto the blogs, by the time you see the blog on the website, there's going to be none left in your local quilt shop. So it's actually not purchased, but I'm sure if you go to your local quilt shop, they will have them right now because we had them in advance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay.
There is a question here. Will this video be available to watch again later? Yes, it will. It will be. Carla, you might give more information.
Yeah, so what we'd like to do, actually, we have a few ideas in mind. So one is, yes, to record it and to publish it at some point. And that will be, we will send you the notification through the newsletter. Then also what we were thinking is actually making a booklet, like an online book to post on QUILTsocial, and it'll be for sale there with all the instructions. So either we're not sure if we're going to do like the 3 quilt versions separately, or if we're going to include all of the 3 of them in one. That is not 100% clear. But yes, those kind of things are coming up. If you want to stay tuned for those announcements. They will be made sometime at, I believe, towards the end of August, so that, you know, like to firm plans up and all that. Very exciting. We did get a lot of comments about, you know, it would be better to have, or more easily to follow the instructions if they were in a book format instead of a blog, which is fine. And so, yes, definitely we heard our viewers, and so we are working on having that done. So for more information about that, we stay tuned. We will announce it online, and especially in our newsletter that is gonna be coming up sometime in August for that. And just to reiterate, if there are no more questions,
I just noticed one earlier that I think it would be very interesting to discuss. Dorothy asked if it was better to buy from the same collection or match different brands. So I think that we can all have our little say in it, but definitely if you look at all of the blog posts, I always show the blog in on just strictly outline so that you can copy the image, print it, and play with your Crayola. I would say play with, you know, bring colored pencils and draw. And definitely you don't have to go with, if really you have to get out of your comfort zone and play with color wheels, and try to see what works best. I mean, we were fortunate. We worked with the collection that we had because we loved it. I think that's what's nice about all of us, is that Elaine went with monochromatic. I went with the word I cannot say in English, analogous. And Paul went with complementary, split complementary, the whole shebang. I mean, it just comes to prove that you can do whatever you want, play with your fabrics. If you go with your favorite color and then play with colors that are surrounding it or complete opposite of the scope, see what works for you, and go with your personality and have fun.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I would just like to say about, you know, should you work with, you know, a specific collection, or should you just mix and match? And honestly, that's really going to depend on you and what the availability of fabrics are in your, you know, in your local shop. You know, in an ideal world, you know, you would be able to walk into your local quilt store or your local fabric store, and they would have, let's say, the entire, you know, Blue Stitch collection. But the chances are that they may have selected only a few of them that they felt would be suitable for their clientele. And so then you don't have access to necessarily the whole collection. That's just the way some of the shops, you know, some of the shops work. And so I think it really depends on you and where you're going with your project. So I do like to work with entire collections, but I also like to do my own thing. Really just sort of depends on what the project is. So I'm kind of both camps. I'm like, yes to a collection because it's fun to do. The designer has already selected all the fabrics and all the values. So it kind of takes that thought process out of the equation for me. But then when I want to do something, which was great because there's a lot of colors in here and a lot of like values and stuff that you needed to think about. Whereas there are other times when I'm like, you know what, I'll just go to my stash and just pull something and make it. So I think it's good to do both because you can learn a lot by working with the collection and a lot also by making your own collection basically for that quilt.
Yeah, that is very true. And I find that when you have to pull from your stash too, it's really a greater adventure because you have to make whatever you have, whatever the sizes are, work. So that is, but whatever it is, whether you're using, you know, like an entire collection or you're using your scraps, it's always good. It's always good. And most importantly, it is your quilt, no one else's. So you do it as you like it. There's no quilt police in my world. And
and I think what we mentioned before also, Elaine mentioned that there were 13 different fabrics used to make that design. That was only because originally, way back when I made the design, it was a fabric collection that had 13 fabrics.
Yeah.
So I wanted to feature all of them because they were so delicious. But
Yeah.
now I'm sure that if we were to remake that quilt another time, I going through the process of making it not once but twice, some of those blocks, I said I could have used easily just 6 different colors and made a wonderful quilt using only 6 fabrics. So that's another thing. If you think you don't have enough of 13 colors to choose from, then bring it back to 6. Play with the values. That's what's important. And if you have the right values, you can work with 6.
Great point.
Is
Yeah.
that a challenge, Claire?
Oh, are you challenging me, Paul?
Maybe to another quilt along at another point in time.
Yes.
But
Maybe.
All right. 3 colors.
20 something.
3 colors. Oh, that's tough.
That would be tough.
That would
That
be
would be
hard.
tough.
I like color. I like fabric. Yeah.
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 Well, and I think one of the things that I take away from this is, when you make the quilt, because, we make the quilt and then you end up with, like in Claire's case, she had 7 orphan blocks. What was she had to do that. I ended up with a bunch of half square triangles, and I ended up with, those pretty salvages. And so I think it's a really great way to sort of step outside of your comfort zone and say, okay, here are 7 orphan blocks. What am I going to do with them? They're not the same size as the one she used in the bed runner. So she got, she made this beautiful pillow out of them. And I think that that's something, a lot of times what people do when they finish a project and they've got those little offcuts and things like that, that they just go, oh, and they, they throw it away or they give it away or whatever. And I think it's kind of fun to actually challenge yourself to say, what can I do with that? How can I use up the remainder of the fabric that I have, or the bits that I didn't use? And, and if it's only a zippered pouch, so what? But you know what? I had fun making these, and, I had fun stitching them on the machine and stuff, and they were simple to do, and, they might make a nice little gift for somebody or whatnot. So I think that would be kind of my takeaway from this, is that, make the quilt great, but don't forget to play around with some of your bits and pieces that are left over.
Oh, yeah. They're treasures on their own, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So if there are no other questions for tonight, I will just reiterate again the 3 prizes that are available for the giveaways. And so the first one is the Benartex Wave Texture 1 Fat Quarter Bundle. Very exciting for that. The second one is Gutermann MCT Polyester 42-piece 100 meters of thread collection in an album. And the third one is the Olisso Project Iron. So they are all very exciting. You have till 12 o'clock tonight to enter if you haven't already done so. Thank you very much, viewers, for attending tonight, for joining us. It has been an absolute pleasure for us to have you join us. And thank you very much, Claire, for the design, for sharing the design.
Thank you for, honestly, thank you for letting all this happen. It really helped me go through this whole pandemic with something to keep me busy. So
focused.
Thank you very much. And
Focused
people are asking for another QAL, by the way, Paul. You opened it up now. People are writing.
Okay, so Claire, Paul needs to design it. Get out your program, Paul, and start drawing.
I'm busy that day. I really am.
Well, 12 blocks, 3 designers, 4 blocks each.
Yeah, there you go. Done. Snap. And
it's a breeze.
And thank you, Elaine, for your awesome effort in taking on Claire's challenge for your own quilt. Fantastic. I love it. I love your work. And Paul, you too, thank you so much for your efforts in bringing yet another take to the whole sparkling blocks, really, because they are sparkling. They have a lot of sparkle within them. Thank you all. If there's nothing else to add, we will call it a good night. And thank you again.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Bye-bye.